As I turned to lock up, a shadowy figure darted across the corridor, sending chills down my spine and confirming my worst fears about the haunted bowling alley. I had been working as a night shift attendant at an old bowling alley for a few months. The place had a reputation for being haunted, but I never paid much attention to the stories. It was just a job, and I enjoyed the quiet hours after closing, even though the dimly lit lanes and the creaking sounds of the old building sometimes made me uneasy. Despite the eerie atmosphere, I had settled into a routine: clean up, lock up, and go home. The rumors of ghostly apparitions and unexplained noises were just that, rumors. Or so I thought. One night, as I was cleaning up after closing, the silence was interrupted by the sound of heavy footsteps echoing across the lanes. Startled, I paused and listened, thinking it must be the janitor. I called out, but there was no response. The footsteps continued, seemingly moving from one end of the alley to the other. I decided to check, thinking maybe the janitor had come in early or someone else was still in the building. I walked down the lanes, the sound of my own footsteps mingling with the echoing thuds. But as I reached the end, I found no one. The lanes were empty, and the silence returned, now even more oppressive. I shrugged it off as my imagination playing tricks on me, or maybe the old building settling. I went back to my tasks, but the uneasy feeling lingered. The sound of footsteps had been so clear, so real. I tried to focus on finishing my work, but every creak and groan of the building made me jump. As the night wore on, the footsteps returned, this time louder and closer. My heart pounded in my chest as I listened to the rhythmic thudding, seeming to follow me as I moved through the bowling alley. I checked the office, the bathrooms, and the storage rooms, but found no one. The fear began to gnaw at me, making it hard to concentrate. The footsteps seemed to be everywhere, echoing off the walls and making it impossible to pinpoint their origin. I felt a cold sweat break out on my forehead, and my hands trembled as I held the flashlight. The sensation of being watched grew stronger, and I couldn't shake the feeling that something unseen was following me. In a moment of desperation, I called out again, hoping to catch whoever was playing this cruel prank. But there was no answer, only the relentless sound of footsteps growing ever closer. The fear was overwhelming, a primal terror that gripped my entire being. I knew I had to get out, but I couldn't leave without locking up. As I hurried to lock up and leave, I saw it, a shadow quickly passing by the corridor of the lanes. It was fleeting, barely a glimpse, but it was enough to send chills down my spine. The shadow was not human. It moved with an unnatural speed and fluidity. My mind raced, trying to comprehend what I had just seen. The hallway seemed to stretch endlessly, the darkness pressing in from all sides. I felt a presence, something malevolent and ancient, watching me. The shadow lingered in my mind, its form seared into my memory. I tried to convince myself it was just a trick of the light, but deep down, I knew better. My hands shook as I fumbled with the keys, my breath coming in short, panicked gasps. The footsteps had stopped, but the oppressive silence was even worse. It felt like the calm before the storm, a moment of eerie stillness before something terrible happened. I had to get out, and fast. With a final, frantic turn of the key, I locked the door and ran out into the night. The cold air hit my face, bringing a small measure of relief. But the fear lingered, a gnawing dread that refused to let go. I didn't stop running until I was safely in my car, the bowling alley a distant silhouette in the rearview mirror. The next day, I couldn't shake the events of the previous night. I approached the manager, still shaken and desperate for some explanation. I recounted the sounds of footsteps, the shadow, and the overwhelming sense of fear. To my surprise, the manager listened calmly, as if he had heard it all before. He revealed that many employees had reported similar experiences over the years: unexplained footsteps, ghostly shadows, and a pervasive feeling of being watched. The bowling alley had a history, he said, of strange occurrences after dark. The stories I had dismissed as rumors were, in fact, a regular part of the night shift experience. Hearing this was both a relief and a new source of fear. I wasn't losing my mind. What I had experienced was real, but it also meant that the bowling alley was truly haunted, and I wasn't sure I could handle another night like that. The accounts from other employees were eerily similar to mine, each one adding to the growing sense of dread. I decided then and there that I couldn't continue working late shifts. The fear was too intense, the risk too great. I requested a change in my schedule, refusing to be in the building after dark. The manager agreed, understanding my reluctance and sharing a knowing look. Reflecting on the experience, I realized how deeply it had affected me. The sound of those footsteps, the glimpse of the shadow, and the overwhelming fear had left a lasting mark. Even now, thinking about that night sends chills down my spine. The bowling alley, once just a place of work, had become a source of nightmares. I avoided the bowling alley as much as possible, even during the day. The stories from my colleagues and the history of hauntings made it clear that whatever haunted the place was not to be taken lightly. The sense of unease never fully left me, a constant reminder of the unknown dangers that lurk in the dark. The unresolved mystery of the entity that haunted the bowling alley added to the lingering sense of dread. What was it, and why did it haunt the lanes? These questions remained unanswered, leaving a haunting curiosity that I couldn't shake. The fear of the unknown, the shadowy figure, and the relentless footsteps are memories that will stay with me forever. The experience taught me to trust my instincts and respect the power of the supernatural. It changed the way I viewed the world, making me more cautious and aware of the hidden dangers that can lurk in seemingly ordinary places. The terror of that night, the haunting presence of the footsteps, and the shadow that followed me are etched into my memory, a dark chapter one will never forget. If you thought that was terrifying, just wait. The next story is even more chilling. Subscribe now and leave a comment if you're brave enough. Story 2. As the lights flickered back on, a ghostly figure dressed in old-fashioned clothes stood at the far end of the game room, staring at us with vacant eyes. My friends and I had been looking forward to checking out the new bowling alley that had recently opened in town. We were excited to spend the evening together, enjoying a few games and exploring the new place. After a few rounds of bowling, we decided to check out the game room upstairs. The game room was filled with various arcade games and pool tables, and we were eager to try them all. The atmosphere was lively and fun, and we quickly got caught up in the excitement of the games. Little did we know, our night of fun was about to take a terrifying turn. As we were playing one of the arcade games, the lights suddenly went out, plunging the room into complete darkness. We stood still, the only sound being our nervous laughter and the faint hum of the machines. The darkness was oppressive, and the silence that followed was even more unsettling. For what felt like an eternity, we waited for the lights to come back on. The tension in the room was palpable, and I could feel my heart pounding in my chest. Just as we were starting to panic, the lights flickered back to life. But what we saw when they did made my blood run cold. At the far end of the room stood a figure, dressed in old-fashioned clothes. The figure was motionless, with a vacant expression that sent chills down my spine. We exchanged confused and fearful glances, trying to make sense of what we were seeing. The figure was unlike anything we had ever seen. It wore clothes that seemed to belong to a different era, and its eyes were empty, devoid of any life or emotion. We were frozen in place, unable to look away from the eerie apparition. The air in the room felt heavy, as if we were intruding on something we shouldn't have. Curiosity and fear battled within us as we decided to approach the figure. We took slow, hesitant steps forward, our eyes locked on the ghostly presence. Just as we were about to get a closer look, the figure vanished before our eyes, dissolving into thin air. We were left standing in stunned silence, trying to process what had just happened. The reality of the situation hit us like a wave. This was no ordinary prank or trick of the light. We had just witnessed something supernatural, something beyond our understanding. The fear that gripped us was overwhelming, and we knew we had to get out of there. We rushed downstairs, our footsteps echoing through the empty hallway. We found the manager and, with a mix of fear and urgency, told him about the figure we had seen. His reaction was not what we expected. Instead of disbelief, he looked uncomfortable, almost as if he had been expecting this. Reluctantly, the manager revealed that the building had been constructed over an old cemetery. He told us that many people had reported seeing strange figures and experiencing unexplained phenomena in the game room. The history of the place added a chilling layer to our encounter, making it even more horrifying. The revelation sent shivers down our spines. We felt a deep sense of unease, knowing that the figure we had seen was connected to the cemetery below. The thought of the restless spirits beneath the building was too much to bear, and we decided to leave immediately. As we drove away from the bowling alley, the fear lingered, casting a shadow over our thoughts. We couldn't stop talking about what we had seen, trying to make sense of the encounter. Each of us had felt the same terror, the same sense of being watched by something otherworldly. The experience left a lasting impact on us. Even after leaving the game room, we couldn't shake the feeling of being followed, of eyes watching our every move. The fear stayed with us, a constant reminder of the night we had encountered the unknown. We made a pact never to return to that place. The shared experience had brought us closer, but it also haunted our memories. We couldn't forget the figure, the old-fashioned clothes, and the vacant eyes that had stared into our souls. The fear had changed us, leaving us more cautious and wary of the unknown. Reflecting on the encounter, I realized how deeply it had affected me. The memory of the figure in the game room is etched into my mind, a constant source of unease. Knowing that the building was constructed over a cemetery only adds to the haunting nature of the experience. The unresolved mystery of the figure's identity and the lingering sense of dread continue to haunt me. I often find myself thinking about that night, wondering who or what we had seen. The fear of the supernatural and the unknown has become a part of my life, shaping my perception of the world. The experience taught me to respect the power of the unknown and to be cautious of places with a haunted reputation. The memory of the figure and the knowledge of the cemetery beneath the building have left a lasting impact on me. I know now that some things are better left undisturbed, and the fear of encountering something similar keeps me on edge. The encounter in the game room was a stark reminder of the hidden dangers that lurk in the shadows. The figure, with its old-fashioned clothes and vacant eyes, will haunt my memories forever. Need to catch your breath? Too bad. The next fright is just around the corner. Subscribe and let us know in the comments how scared you are. Story 3. As I scrubbed the blood-covered bowling ball, I looked up into the glass reflection to see a pale, bloodied figure standing right behind me, its silent gaze chilling me to the bone. As the manager of a popular local bowling alley, part of my nightly routine involved a final walkthrough of the lanes after closing. This was usually my favorite time of the day, quiet, with the distant hum of the machines creating a soothing backdrop. Everything was routine until one unsettling night. It was just past midnight, and I was making my final rounds when I spotted something unusual on lane 16, a bowling ball left behind. As I approached, I noticed the ball wasn't just forgotten. It was covered in streaks of what looked disturbingly like blood. My first thought was a practical joke by some teenagers, so, with a mix of annoyance and mild amusement, I picked it up to clean it off. I took the ball to the utility sink at the back of the alley, the overhead lights flickering slightly as I walked. The alley was silent, the kind of silence that amplifies every little sound, making the soft thud of my footsteps echo off the walls. As I started cleaning the ball, the red streaks smeared across the white surface, not coming off as easily as I had hoped. The substance was thick, clinging to the ball and brush, and a cold shiver ran down my spine. Was this really just a prank? The air grew colder, and a strange feeling settled over me. It was as if the atmosphere of the alley had shifted, the shadows seeming darker and more menacing. The light above me flickered more aggressively, casting strange patterns on the walls. A sense of unease grew within me, the pit of my stomach tightening. I should have left the ball alone, I thought, as I scrubbed harder, trying to ignore the creeping dread, I felt a sudden chill, like a draft had swept through the room. The hairs on the back of my neck stood up, and an instinctive fear told me I wasn't alone. Reluctantly, I raised my eyes to the glass panel above the sink, where I saw my reflection, and behind it, another figure. The figure was ghastly pale, its eyes hollow and dark, blood smeared across its face and clothes. It stood just a few feet behind me, silent and still. My heart leapt into my throat, and I screamed, dropping the ball. It hit the sink with a loud crash, breaking the glass. Water mixed with blood like paint splashed onto the floor. I spun around, heart pounding, but there was nothing. The room was empty, no sign of the figure that had been so vividly behind me just seconds ago. The broken glass lay scattered on the floor, reflecting the flickering light. I was alone, or so it seemed. My mind raced, trying to make sense of what had just happened. Was it a hallucination, stress, or something far more sinister? Shaken, I left the cleaning supplies on the floor and rushed out of the utility area. I didn't stop until I was back in the safety of the main office. That night, I left the alley as quickly as I could, locking up without finishing my rounds. The next morning, I returned, more out of obligation than desire. I shared my experience with the staff, hoping for some rational explanation or at least share disbelief. Instead, one of the older employees hesitated before telling me about a past incident. Years ago, a customer had suffered a violent accident in that very lane, dying from his injuries. His death had been traumatic, marking the start of whispered tales among the staff of strange occurrences. Hearing this, I felt a cold dread settle in my bones. The alley no longer felt safe, nor did it feel like just a workplace. It felt haunted, marked by a past that was reaching into the present. Unable to dismiss my experience as mere imagination, I requested a transfer to another location later that day. I could no longer face the night shift, not with the possibility of encountering whatever was tied to that bloodied bowling ball. Discussing the incident with friends and family brought no comfort. Most listened with skeptical ears, attributing my experience to an overactive imagination or stress. But the few who believed shared their own stories of unexplained phenomena, giving me a small sense of validation. Despite the transfer, the memory of that night lingered. I found myself jumpy, easily startled by shadows or unexpected noises. The bowling alley had changed for me, transformed from a place of recreation to one of fear. I avoided going near it, even during the day. Colleagues from the alley occasionally reached out, sharing tales of odd noises or fleeting shadows. None had experienced anything as intense as my encounter, but it was enough to keep the rumors alive. The alley's reputation among the staff shifted subtly. Jokes about its haunted lanes were now tinged with genuine wariness. The encounter left a deep impact on me, altering how I interacted with the night and dark spaces. I became more cautious, more aware of the environments I entered, always on the lookout for something amiss. The fear that something might be lurking just out of sight lingered long after I left the bowling alley. The image of the bloodied bowling ball and the ghostly figure haunted my dreams, blending into my daily thoughts. I found myself researching paranormal occurrences and hauntings, seeking explanations or similar experiences that might explain what I had seen. This experience reshaped my beliefs about the supernatural. I could no longer dismiss such stories as mere fiction. The bowling alley, with its ghostly footsteps and the spectral figure, became a symbol of the unknown that could not be easily explained away. As time passed, the intensity of the fear faded, but the curiosity and unease remained. I often wondered about the history of the alley and the spirits that might still linger there. The story became a part of my own story, a chilling chapter in my life that I occasionally shared with others, serving as a stark reminder that sometimes reality can be stranger and more frightening than fiction.